Hey everyone, welcome back. So President Donald Trump is promising Americans $2,000 stimulus payments. This is something that he can actually make happen by the end of this year in 2025. And will Democrats also get behind this idea and vote for it to send it to his desk by the end of 2025? I don't know. Leave your thoughts and comments below. But before we go ahead and dive into the video for today, if you would like to receive up to $200 in free stock or $200 in free cash, in a pinned comment below, I will be leaving a link to Robinhood. All you have to do is once you click on that link is just sign up for a free account and then simply link your bank account. You do not even have to make an opening deposit. At that point in time, Robinhood will be sending you one free stock worth all the way up to $200. And if you'd rather just have the cash, all you have to do is once you receive the free stock is just sell it for what it's worth and then transfer the cash value right back to your bank account. Okay, so before we dive into the $2,000 stimmy checks, we have some new polling out from Emerson College, where Trump's approval rating is dropping further and further, which could actually lead to these $2,000 checks taking place possibly. So a new Emerson College polling national survey finds that 41% of voters approve of the job President Donald Trump is doing in office, while 49% disapprove. This reflects a 4-point drop in approval from 45% in October, while the president's disapproval increased by 1 point from 48% to 49%. So you can see that is continuing to drop all the way down to 41% at this point in time. So nearly 1 year after he was elected, President Trump's approval has flipped. Since the first Emerson College poll of the new administration, Spencer Kimball, executive director of Emerson College Polling, said since his inauguration, Trump has lost support among key groups. Republican voters' approval decreased 12 points from 91% to 79%, and his disapproval intensified among independent voters from 41% to 51%, and Hispanics from 39% to 54%. On the generic 2026 congressional ballot, the Democratic candidate has a 4-point edge on the Republican, 40% to 40%. 16% are undecided. Now, 43% say their vote in the midterms will be to express opposition to President Trump, while 29% will vote to express support for Trump, and 28% say Trump is not a factor in the vote. Voters were asked how important a series of issues are when it comes to their vote in the 2026 midterm elections. The economy is very important to 75% of voters, followed by threats to democracy at 61%, immigration at 59%, housing affordability at 57%, and abortion at 46%. Now the economy there is the most important factor to the majority of Americans at 75%, which in turn, could lead to these $2,000 checks actually taking place. Is this something that can actually pass through Congress? President Trump is pushing it pretty hard. Let's go ahead and watch.
Without tariffs, this country would be in such trouble, as they were for many years. That's why we owe $38 trillion. And one of the things we're going to do, we're going to issue a dividend to our middle-income people and lower-income people of about $2,000. And we're going to use the remaining tariffs to lower our debt. We're going to be lowering our debt, which is a national security thing. So we're doing a lot of good work. And the numbers were reported so incorrectly. The real numbers are trillions of dollars have been taken in or gotten in terms of investment from the tariffs. And so if that were ever reversed, it would be a disaster. Frankly, it would be a national security problem for our country.
We heard about the Doge dividends. What about tariff dividends? The Treasury collected almost $200 billion in tariff revenue in the fiscal year 2025 that ended in September. Now, President Trump wants to cut Americans a check, writing on Truth Social over the weekend that low and middle income Americans will receive $2,000 payments from the tariff income, and the rest will be used to help pay down the national debt. This is pending a decision from the Supreme Court, which just days ago cast doubt on the tariff legality or the use of power to impose these tariffs. But Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says a dividend can come in a lot of different ways.
The $2,000 dividend could come in lots of forms, in lots of ways, George. It could be just the tax decreases that we are seeing on the president's agenda. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime, no tax on Social Security, deductibility of auto loans. So, those are substantial deductions that, are being financed in the tax bill.
I love how the Treasury Secretary spun that little gem. He's like, well, it's not a check. It's just a tax cut that you already got. That was back in July.
Right. But the president does sound like he's talking about a check, if I'm not mistaken from reading that Truth Social. And I think that he realizes that if you go the way of Besant and try to explain it that way, there are going to be people that aren't touched by that, and they're going to feel like they were left out of it somehow, or that they got the short end of the stick. And so all of a sudden he's coming out with these dividend checks for low and middle income. And I'm thinking to myself, this is really interesting, as we're waiting to hear what the Supreme Court's going to do on this. After we listened to oral arguments last week, I didn't really think that the court was that positive on keeping tariffs in place in the same structure and form that they currently exist in. And then we started having the conversation, well, what would we do with the money? How would you give it back to people? This, to me, sounds like a way for the president to do that before the court tells him what to do, which gives him more power and more control over the narrative as it is unfolding here. I don't know what the Supreme Court will do, how they will rule on this particular case, but I always think President Trump is a few steps ahead of what is going to happen. I think they're already thinking about plans on rewriting these tariffs under different laws to be able to keep them in play if the court says that they're not allowed to. But this, to me, sounded like, you know what, I'm going to go spend this money before they tell me. And he talks about paying down the national debt with what's left over. I think, Taylor, I know you're in this camp. I would have liked to have him take the whole $200 billion and pay down the debt.
So, and that's where I am. Super, super cold take. Everyone hates me for this. I would not be handing out more stimmy checks, especially, let's say you even argue that a tariff is a tax on a consumer, or corporations are passing on the extra cost to the consumers. We've tried this. We did this under Biden. Stimmy season has got to come to an end. I do not want government money that they're taxing to then give to me. $2,000 is tons of money and would absolutely help tons of families. But I don't want to be relying on government for a check. Even though it sounds so tangible, if you get a check in the mail with Trump's name on it, sounds great.
Inflation.
No.
Right?
Inflation.
We're going to just inject all that money. People go out. Charles Payne was talking about it the other day. They spend.
That experiment for stimmies, it doesn't work.
I agree with you 100% on the economics, but for the politics of it, I think for everyday Americans, what happens in Washington is so far removed. This makes it tangible, as you said. It brings it home, and it's a physical representation, or digital, because it comes in direct deposit, that what is happening with the trade wars. Why are we doing it? It's a patriotic refund in some way. But I agree with you 100%. We should not be spending money we collect over here when we have a big debt that we still have to pay down. Every last penny. We've talked about this. You're a saver. You use that to get yourself ahead. You got to do that as a country as well. We need fiscal discipline. But this could point to, you bring it up, we talked about it on the break, is it because the president's afraid of his economic approval rating, right? Affordability, that buzzword, won the Democrats a lot of seats. How do you make life sound like the Republicans are making life more affordable?
You know what? So this is obviously something President Donald Trump really wants to happen. He sees that the approval rating is going down. He sees that Americans' viewpoints on the economy are not all that great. So what better than a $2,000 check to land in the pockets of Americans, especially before the midterm elections next year in November of 2026. Again, leave your thoughts and comments below. Now, according to CNBC, economists have also warned that direct payments could cause inflation to actually flare up again. So pandemic-era fiscal stimulus contributed to an increase in inflation of about 2.6 percentage points in the U.S., at least according to 2023 research from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. And also, there's some numbers that make this just a little bit strange. So the idea of sending tariff rebate checks is not new. Back in late July, Trump said the administration was, quote, thinking about a little rebate for Americans from tariff revenue, and Senator Josh Hawley then, after that, introduced the American Workers Rebate Act of 2025, which pitched a rebate check funded with tariff revenue as soon as this year. The Senate referred that bill to the Committee on Finance, where it remains. And according to the Treasury Department's September report, the U.S. collected roughly $195 billion in customs duties so far in 2025, more than doubling last year's total. And a separate analysis by the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget estimated the payments could cost as much as $600 billion, assuming the dividends are designed like COVID-era checks. I said, quote, they are going to pay back more than the tariff revenue. Those are the numbers that are making this strange. So if these checks cost in total $600 billion, as one group is estimated there, but we're only bringing in, let's say, $195 billion, so we're going to be spending $400 billion more on these checks than what we're actually bringing in. So these numbers all in all aren't making sense, and we still don't have an idea of which income levels are going to be receiving these checks. Trump said that all Americans are going to be receiving them except high income. Who is he considering to be high income? Back during the COVID era checks, it was $75,000 for individuals and double that at $150,000 for married couples. Also, is this money going to be going to dependents as well? If you have like a family of four, a married couple plus 2 children, is it going to be $8,000 for them? $2,000 per person times 4, $8,000 in total? Or is it going to be $2,000 per household? That's going to make a big difference, because if it's $2,000 per dependent as well, and you have like $8,000, $10,000 going to households, this is obviously going to cost substantially more. But again, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Are you backing this idea as well? Is this something that you would love to see happen? Is it something that you would not like to see happen? Leave your thoughts and comments below. But that's all we have for today's video, and I will see you in the next one.